So while the techniques is stabilizing, Nurit, I will just take a sec to present you. You will speak on the topic Holocaust education, the rhetoric of victimhood and power. So we know each other for some time, and your works have many supporters here in Luxembourg, as all over the world. You came already twice in Luxembourg to speak on Israeli textbooks and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So you were a lecturer in language education at the David Yelin Academic College in Jerusalem and at the Hebrew University before you retired. You specialized your research in Israeli education, language development in schools, and racism in Israeli educational discourse. One of your books, Holocaust Education and the Semiotics of Othering in Israeli School Books, received the American Publishers Prize. An ardent defender of Palestine, you are a co-initiator of the Russell Tribunal of Palestine in 2009, and you have received several awards, including the Sakharov Prize for Human Rights and Freedom of Thought, awarded by the European Parliament. The floor is yours, Nurit.
You see that?
Yes. Yes.
All right, it's very good. So this is the title. And of course, it's all in my last book that was mentioned here. Pardon. Holocaust Education and the Semiotics of Othering in Israeli School Books. Now, school books in general, not only in Israel, in general, all over the world, the reason we have school books is because the state wants to legitimate its actions to the young, including the state's founding crimes. Israeli school books are meant to legitimate the Zionist project of conquest and settlement to both Jewish and Palestinian Arab students that learn the same books in Israel. School books bring the process of meaning-making to a temporary standstill in textual form. That means that whenever a school book is published, you can find there the official meaning of the state of affairs. That's why whenever governments change, they fight over textbooks. Wait, I see you and I don't see my thingy here. Okay. Especially in Israel, every government that changes fights to change the school books because it wants its meaning to be taught. Therefore, my assumption when I started studying Holocaust textbooks was that they would reflect the current position of the state regarding the post-Holocaust slogan, "Never Again," which would inevitably be reflected in the representation of present-day others. Okay, wait, I'm going to do this. Yeah. Voila. Okay. The argument, or I can say my conclusions from my study are that Holocaust education in Israel is meant to create heterophobia on one hand, make the children afraid of anybody who is not Jewish or Zionist, and the indifference towards the suffering of others on the other hand. And I will show you that. School books present Holocaust victims through Nazi perspective and introduce the criteria of utility regarding the killing of others. Now, I come from a field that is called social semiotics. I will explain in a minute. And my analysis is multimodal, which means I see the page and whatever is in the page, on the page, the visual, the graphs, the words, everything, I see it as one unit of meaning. I don't analyze the pictures and then the verbal and so on, but the relationships between them. And and my question always is, what was the interest of the book's writers or designers? So as you see, the main thing in such an analysis is really the social, because the social determines the semiotic choices, and it is the social that affected by the semiotic social choices. And the semiotic analysis of textbooks tries to answer social questions and reveal rhetorical interests through a multimodal analysis. What did they want to do with what they wrote? Yeah, I think that Barth said, yeah, what does he want to say with what he says? So this is the question, really. So the social question of my study was, how do the oppressors educate their children, which is a paraphrase of Frantz Fanon? How do the oppressors behave? Which means, how do you take nice Jewish boys and girls and educate them to be these people? Okay? People who think that killing an 11-year-old little girl with a kitchen knife is the right thing to do, and then eternalize it on their cell phones. And that this is something that is good for the country, for the nation. All right? This girl was part of what was called the Knives Intifada, but it was really a movement of suicide. My son Guy calls it suicide by cops, which means they would approach the checkpoint with a knife or with something and then get shot. And these people think it's the right thing to do. So how do you do that? Of course, school books are only a small part of education, but they reflect the perceptions and the ideology. And my semiotic question was, what semiotic sources do textbooks use to represent others to children in Israel? So who are the others? Israeliness, or the Israeli, I would say, character, was constituted against three groups of others. The first group was East European, studious, weak, and idle diasporic Jews who later perished in the Holocaust without resistance. These were the Jews we don't want to be. And this is what Ben-Gurion said in 1939. He said, call me anti-Semitic, but I don't want to be part of these Jews. And I was brought up to despise these Jews, really. If they were weak, we are strong. If they were pale, we are suntanned, and so on and so forth. The second group, Arabs, who have replaced the Germans as the potential exterminator of the Jewish people. Ever since Israel befriended the other Germany, the role of exterminators was imposed on the Arabs. The last group, we'll not talk about it, are non-Western Jews who were brought for demographic reason to the States and are deemed inferior and so on, but we will not talk about this group. Now, what is the Israeli interpretation of never again? Israel has adopted the interpretation of never again to us. This stance leaves only two options: to sacrifice others or be sacrificed, to kill or be killed. And this engenders the rhetoric of victimhood and power. Since we are the eternal victims, we must be the strongest in order to survive. And the educational message, and also the political message, of course, is that all Jews are united by the founding trauma, the Holocaust of European Jews. This trauma becomes the foundation for the collective and personal identity of every Israeli today. Much more than Zionism, much more. We all are what Bauman called hereditary victims of the Nazis. And the Holocaust is round the corner. So the children are educated to a Holocaust. The former despised Jews who perished dishonorably became the potential us who may perish again in the hands of Nazi Arabs. You see that in the speeches of Netanyahu when he says during the Holocaust we were hopeless, and now we have a strong state and a strong army. You see that? Our voice is heard. We will never make the mistake of being weak again, and so on and so forth. We will block anyone who wants to exterminate us again and to annihilate us. So there's complete identification. We are the victims, the same victims. Also, our president, who became very eloquent after the 7th of October and was granted a doctorate of honor from the university for that, said, I want to say to all those European leaders, the state of Israel 2023 is not 1943. Now we have the capacity, okay? We are the same people, the same victims. Holocaust instruction. Holocaust instruction was not so strong until after the 73 war, when Israeli quasi lost the war. And then they decided, and there was a huge movement of immigration from Israel by young people. And then the Ministry of Education decided to enforce Holocaust studies, okay? With the aim of educating children to be willing to sacrifice their lives for the nation and keeping them from immigrating. That's what I said about the heterophobia. And Israel is presented in all the books, in all the school books, as an alternative to disaster. And the Holocaust, it's raison d'être. That's it. School children learn the narrative from Holocaust to resurrection, in which the Holocaust becomes the distillation of history and Zionism, its ultimate conclusion. This is a text for kindergarten. The Holocaust is a huge disaster. And this disaster happens to the Jewish people, not in the land of Israel, but in other different countries all over the world. Jews can travel and visit other countries, but every Jew should know that Israel is his only home. So the idea is that they were exterminated because they didn't have a state and an army. Teacher's guide for second grade, 7-year-old children. The students will understand that during World War II, the Jews did not have a state. That's the point. The establishment of the state of Israel guarantees our security and safety. We are in conflict with the neighboring countries and with all the Arab countries, but now we can defend ourselves. So you see how they conflate. And for the oldest students, the Zionist movement saw in the Shoah the proof that the Zionist way was the right one. The wish to establish a Jewish state was grasped as the need of all Jews in the world. And all the books end with this or similar picture of Israeli students wrapped in the flag marching into Auschwitz-Birkenau on the rails. And this is the ultimate victory of Zionism over National Socialism. But how do these books represent the victims themselves, the Holocaust victims? So the point is that in the books, we are told to the most gruesome detail about the annihilation of European Jews, but we are told nothing or next to nothing about the annihilated themselves. There's no room made for the annihilated themselves. As if they don't matter. What matters is that they were exterminated. Who they are, what happened, how they lived before is of no interest at all, because these are the Jews we don't want to be. The victims are represented as specimen of categories or as icons of the final solution. The school books present or display only Nazi photographs. Although there were Jewish photographers who risked their lives to photograph and document the life in the ghetto, and even from Auschwitz, we have 4 photographs. Nothing is shown of these photographers. All the photographs are Nazi. But the books fail to provide photos phenomenology. What does it mean? They never tell you who took the picture, in what circumstances, for what purpose, who were the photographed, did they cooperate, were they under duress, were they aware or unaware of being photographed, and is the photograph is staged, because many photographs were staged by the how did I call it, the photographic company of the Nazis, to show, for example, that life in the ghetto is wonderful and in the camps, etc., etc. Many photographs were staged, but the book don't tell you anything. They take these Nazi photographs and they present them as objective and true. And mostly they show atrocity images of the Jews we don't want to become again. Just a quick look. I took a few books and counted the atrocity pictures. So you see 35 out of 45 atrocity, 48 out of 55 atrocity, 135 out of 150 atrocity. The only book that does not have atrocity pictures is the ultra-Orthodox school book. That's interesting. Now for the young ones, there are mostly drawings and painting and so on, such as this one. Yes, a present to the commander's son on his 10th birthday to shoot a Jewish boy. Give me the child. Where's mama? And there are many more. For the older ones, you have atrocity photographs. And as a researcher, scholar Marian here said, who studies these photographs, atrocity images resist mourning. You don't mourn a dead man or a dead child. You mourn the living man that he was, the living child that he was. Professor Hannah Yablonka, Holocaust historian in Israel, who was the chief scientist of the Ministry of Education, said, we only teach the pornography of evil that has no educational value. After that, she resigned. But she keeps saying that all the time. I'll show you the most extreme picture, although I did not put it in my book out of respect for the dead girls. Wilhelm Brass was an inmate in Auschwitz, and his job was to photograph the twins before they were put to death. This is what he wrote in his autobiography. I felt uneasy because among the kids, there were 13, 14-year-old girls who experienced great shame, completely defenseless creatures about whom I knew only that they soon would die. They stood naked, one next to the other, and posed for the photo. There they were, completely exposed, facing a young man. Even in this situation, they felt embarrassed. Israeli books put this picture in the school books as it is, the whole body. And you can imagine what happened to 15, 14, 16-year-old boys and girls when they see that. Except for, of course, it creates what Baudrillard called horrid fascination. But it also created trauma. In the religious state books, they only show half the body. They don't show the whole body. And as one of the scholars, listeners said, our children would never be exposed in this way. And the message is that these children are not like our children. They are another species of children. And the law that exists in Israel against child pornography or child nudity does not apply to them. They are not entitled to privacy or to what is called the proper distance. The proper distance that we usually take from one another for reasons of dignity and politeness and so on. And you can think that every time the book is opened by anybody, they undergo the same humiliation they underwent in Mengeler's laboratory. For the German eyes, they were nothing but biological machines. But the question is, what are they for the school book designer? What are they for the students? What do they make of it? One of the researchers, Lili Huliraki, says it is the separation of the humane conditions of the viewers and of the torturers from the condition of the sufferers that defines Mengeler's twins and all other naked and exposed Holocaust sufferers, as well as today's third world sufferers, as absolute others. They are not us, they are others. And the laws and rules and conventions that apply to us and to our behavior do not apply to them. This visual othering sustains powerful hierarchies of human life. And by the way, when they are shown in the books, what is written is twins served Mengele in his horrid experiments, but twins is written in the masculine form, which is the general form in Israel. So there's no address to these girls, as if they tell the students, don't consider them, they're just a sample. However, the visual does the job of traumatizing. Another way of showing pictures is in order to explain Nazi logic. This is a very known photograph in Ivangorod, Ukraine, during what was called the Holocaust of bullets. Before the gas, they used to shoot them. So you see 1, 2, 3 rifles at this woman. In the books, we see this one that became an icon, really. But the books do not address the picture at all. They say nothing about what this picture symbolizes or what this picture really shows. They say nothing about Ivangorod Jews. They say nothing about motherhood, about evil or male evil. No. The photographs usually comes below the heading, searching for alternative to direct shooting or the transition to gas tracks. Let's see one text. The method of direct killing had its shortcomings, which means it wasn't that perfect. It was slow, wasted a lot of ammunition, at least 1 bullet per person, and was hard to conceal. The method presented certain hardships, as far as the German soldiers were concerned as well. The work was dirty and required direct contact between the murderers and the victim. This is why, okay, this is the logic. The Germans searched for a more effective alternative for the mass murder of the Jews. Shaul Friedlander, the historian, calls it textbook style or historiography of business as usual. You write about the most horrendous things in the world in the most impassionate way, as if you were writing about agriculture. There is no what La Capra called empathic unsettlement in the writing. You don't feel it. You don't feel any empathy in the writing. No, it had its shortcoming. It presented certain hardship. I mean, it was good, but not that good. That is why, as if this industrialization of murder can submit to human logic. They impose the human logic on it. One book of Gutmann explicitly asked the children to adopt Nazi logic. Under the photograph, you have this question. What were the reasons that drove the Nazis to seek alternative to the direct shooting of Jews according to this photograph? This is all they say about the photograph. It was also in the final examination of history in 1922. Such writing leaves the viewers detached as far as possible from the sufferers themselves. It teaches students the bureaucratic thinking and the industrialization of mass murder, along with the total indifference to human life and human expressions of despair and hopelessness. There is no shred of empathy. Another book that tells you about the solution, which was to start working with gas. In the autumn of 41, killing began in hermetically sealed gas tracks into which the exhaust pipe of the car was inserted. The Jews were loaded into the track, which would drive slowly around the designated area until it was clear that all its cargo had suffocated and died. Cargo. Cargo is what the Nazis called the Jews. In an interview with Gita Sereni, Franz Stengel, former commander of Treblinka examination camp, declared that he regarded the Jews as cargo to be dispatched. So you didn't feel they were human beings? Cargo, he said tonelessly, they were cargo. Stengel justified his choice of the word by describing the victims as naked, huddled together, and whipped like animals. He compared the Jewish victim to cows that he saw in the slaughterhouse. So the Israeli book used the same word. Victims can be shown as specimen of categories. For example, this chapter is about the badge. See, the badge with the Jude that they had to wear. It shows two devastating pictures of this woman here and of this little girl here. But I believe it has explicit and implicit motivation. The explicit motivation is to talk about the badge, but for younger children, they put this photograph of a smiling boy selling the badges. We don't know why he smiled, but it's a lovely picture. This one is the most devastating, horrible picture. This is for the older boys, closer to the army. It was taken by Heinrich Jost, a Nazi officer who sneaked into the ghetto and took about 100 and something pictures. Let's see what Jost say about the woman and what the Israeli book says about the woman. Jost, this woman stood with closed eyes in front of a wall of tattered posters announcing a symphony concert and a program at the Café Ogrod. She was selling padded armbands with a Star of David on them, which every Jew was required to wear. She looked as if she was about to topple over and die the next moment. The school book says this woman found herself a way to make a living by selling armbrets. As you see, there's no empathy, no unsettlement, nothing. What about the little girl? The book says a Jewish girl from Germany with a yellow badge. And then this is it. When was the yellow badge used to identify Jews in the past? What was the difference between past usage and this of the Nazis? That's all they say. Nothing about the little girl. But again, the visual was chosen. And it's the visual that traumatizes. Because the very existence of this photograph means that she was murdered. Now we can see what we find in Yad Vashem archive. Hannah Lehrer, 6 years old, a Munich Jew who wears both her personal golden Jewish star around her neck and the mandated yellow star badge identifying her. Hannah was later sent to Riga, Latvia, where she was killed. So it's not that they don't have the means to tell us who the little girl is, but as if the message is, don't look at the girl, she's not important, we don't care who she is, where she lived, how old she is, what was her name. We are talking about the badge, she's here by chance. However, they chose this photograph, and this is the traumatizing. Another way of showing victims is by functionalizing them. In a book called Identity and Identification, the Holocaust is told through poems and stories. One of the poems is a poem about a boy Avram by Nathan Alterman, Israeli poet laureate. And it tells about a boy that comes back home after the war and he's afraid to go up the stairs because he knows he will find his family slaughtered. They explain the poem over 5 pages. And on every page you have this to represent the boy Avram. The last page, you have the flag of Israel all over the sky, like Providence itself. And again, with this. Who is it, you know? Anna Maria Stella Steinbach. Yeah, it's a very known photograph. Why should she represent a Jewish boy who came back alive from the war? She has nothing to do with Jews. She has nothing to do with the flag of Israel. But it doesn't matter. They needed a face, and it looked like a good face. Another. This is also a very known photograph. Happened on what was called Bloody Wednesday in Olkutz, where somebody killed a German officer and they came and took their revenge on the Jews. They made all the Jews lie down and they brought this rabbi after they tore up his talit, broke his tefillin, took his shoe and asked him to pray. Okay? His name was Rabbi Yitzhak Hagerman. He was not killed on that day. He was killed 2 years after. But the book doesn't think it's very important, and they say a Jew wraps himself in his talit before being murdered. Such mistakes, as Janina Struk says, such misinformation serves Holocaust deniers. And the textbook turns Hagerman into what the Nazis wanted him to become: nameless, voiceless, impersonalized, a unit or shtick in a category of many other Jews praying before they are murdered. Now, the caption of the photograph talks about another rabbi altogether, Rabbi Doniel of Klem. What was the interest of doing that? To save room? The story of Doniel of Klem is fantastic, but they don't show his picture. You see, Daniel was murdered with his students on July 29, 41. Hagerman was killed with his family 42, and the photograph was taken 40. Now, there is another way of relating to this photograph. Holocaust writer, Israeli Holocaust writer, Katzetnik, had a cabin in which he wrote his books. And the only picture he had in the cabin was this picture. He didn't know who it was. But he said, I couldn't take my eyes away from the face of the Jew. He was about my age. So many times had I been in this situation, but never had I attained such a state of transcendence. Just look at the serenity on his face and at those eyes. He looks down at the spot where he may fall in another moment. His hands are folded, defying description, as does the light beaming from his bare feet. What Katzetnik does is really making what the books don't want to do. The books want to show us these Jews as the Jews we don't want to be. Katzetnik venerates the Jew on his last moment. And the last thing I want to show you is what I call Zionization. Non-Zionist victims are never commemorated. Nobody is commemorated, but sometimes some are, like Anna Frank and so on. This is a very important picture. This is one page. This is Hannah Senesh, who was sent by the Zionist leadership to Hungary as a parachute in a show of rescue. They knew it was a suicide mission. She was caught and killed. These people are Russian, communists. This one is Jewish, he is not. But the heading is Jewish partisans were executed all over Europe. He is not Jewish, and they were not partisans. Not partisans at all. The Nazis accused them of being partisans, and that's why they were hanged, but they were not partisans. But the caption of this page, of these double pictures, says on the 7th of November, Hannah Senesh was executed. Nothing about the others. Another book says, hang partisans in Minsk. On the left, Jewess Masha Bruskina, 17. That's all. Now, a scholar named Mercedes Camino. Many years, nobody knew who this girl was. She studies the case, and she writes that Masha did not want the audience to see her dead face, and she fought with the hangers to be hanged in a way that her back is to the audience. She says turning her back to the spectators was Bruskina's last act of defiance, the only one available to her, refusing to face the photographer. But the Israeli school book does not respect the dying wish of this girl. This is the picture, the official picture. But it is not as traumatizing as this one. So they showed this picture, though they know that she asked not to show it. So what happens after so much atrocity, disrespect, lack of empathy towards Holocaust victims? All too often, and I quote a historian named Landau, Ronnie Landau, all too often students of the Holocaust confront no other pictures of the Jew except the one of unrelieved torment and victimization. This can create an obsessive and utterly unbalanced view of the entire Jewish role in history, and for that matter, of all Jews. This is what they know about East European Jews, nothing else. The slogan in Israel since 2019 is, on Holocaust Day, the responsibility to remember responsibly. And the question is, do these books teach to remember at all? What I think is that the representation of Holocaust victims reveal an interest on the part of the writers and designers of the curriculum to punch the children in their guts, as the Inspector General Avraham Green declared in the 90s, to traumatize them and thereby guarantee their loyalty to the state of Israel and not to let the fire of vengeance die out. However, this vengeance is not directed towards the German persecutors and the collaborators in Europe, but towards Palestinian colonized subjects and citizens. Palestinians are depicted either as primitive vile race, the Jews of the Jews, or as almighty Nazis, or not at all. Mostly you don't see them at all, they're not mentioned, but when they're mentioned, by stereotyping. For example, one book, every time they speak about the Arab citizens of Israel, you see this picture of some, I don't know, Alibaba. They are presented abstractly as problems: the Jewish problem, the Palestinian problem, the refugee problem, developmental problem, demographic problem, security threat, and the books write, these problems must be solved. Or they're not shown at all. You see, this is the cover of a very nice series of books living together in Israel. You don't see any Arab here. You don't see any Ethiopians here either. You don't see anybody brown here either, but you don't see Arabs. Or for example, this Jabalia refugee camp doesn't exist anymore. But even when it existed, this is how they showed it, without people. Theo van Leeuwen says this is the angle of the pilot who flies too high to be able to see the people on whom he's dropping the bomb. This is the education. This is a map of Arab population in Israel. And these areas, they say it's an area for which we have no data, meaning no people. And one book I found that shows a checkpoint, but you see what a wonderful checkpoint it is. Nobody's there. The soldiers are drinking coffee and chatting, and then they can ask all kinds of abstract questions. What is the purpose of the checkpoint? How does it represent our defensive democracy? And so on. But the people against whom this checkpoint was built are not there. This is the real picture. The last thing I'm talking about is conflating Palestinians and German Nazis. And this continues what Mira said before, that whenever there is an attack by Palestinians, it's always decontextualized. It comes out of the blue. So this book that prepares students for the final exams writes, in both wars and in Palestinian terrorist attacks, Israeli experienced loss, bereavement, and existential danger, which allow them to identify more easily with Holocaust survivors. This comes under a chapter that is called The Formation of Holocaust Remembrance. But the chapter does not speak about the Holocaust. It only speaks about Palestinian terrorist attacks that made Israeli feel like Holocaust victims. Here, it was also on the exam. Considering the following Palestinian terrorist attacks, choose one of them and explain its impact on the formation of Holocaust remembrance. We remember the Holocaust when we go through the same experience. So, Israeli school books inculcate the fear of others alongside elite racism towards others. In order to colonize the land, preserve our identity from all form of mixing, interbreeding, or invasion. That's the conclusion. And I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nurit. We are running a little bit out of time, but still we will take one or two questions if they are short, and also with short answers. Then we will do our break. Yes.
Are we supposed to understand that if you are a bad Jew, you were or you will be exterminated, and that if you are a good Jew, then you will not be exterminated, just like the Holocaust survivors.
Yeah. I don't know, good or bad, but you have to defend your country, your democracy, and then you will, yeah. As long as they are under control, and as long as we outnumber them within the borders of Israel, because this is very important to be majority, we are safe.
There one other question? Yes.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions from the YouTube Live. Just wanted to know how the Arab minority in these schools sort of lived these depictions, and how how they were reacting to those images that you were showing, and if they were perceived in any different way, given the fact that their families had lived sort of similar fates when they were cleansed from their land.
The Arab Israelis, as I said before, study the same things, only translated to Arabic. What is their true reaction? I cannot tell you, because they don't dare say, neither the teachers nor the students. But this is what they learn. They learn the Zionist history, and they learn Hebrew literature. They learn nothing about their own culture. They don't learn about the Nakba. They're not allowed to, but they do learn about the Holocaust.
Maybe it might be important, Nurit, also to tell to the people that most of the time Jewish and Arabic children are not mixed. They are not in the same schools, even if they have the same school books.
No. There is a different system. And for the Jewish sector, we have hundreds of books, and because it's private industry and teachers can choose what they want. For the Arab sector, there's only one book for every subject.
Okay, so thank you, Nurit.
In the mixed schools, they don't do it. They don't study it. They have their own program.
So thank you very much, Nurit. We will have now a 12-15 minutes break where you can have a drink. And Nurit, if you want to come back for Hila or later for the discussion, it's like you want. Now we just have a break here of 10-15 minutes.